You wake up already tired, not the kind of tired sleep fixes, not the kind a coffee solves. It's heavier than that. Your body might be fine, but your mind feels foggy, slow, resistant, like it's dragging itself through the day instead of moving forward. You stare at simple tasks and feel overwhelmed. Things you want to do feel harder than they should be. And the longer it goes on, the louder the question becomes, why can't I just get myself together? So you label yourself lazy, undisciplined, unmotivated. You replay past failures in your head. You compare yourself to people who seem energized, focused, productive. And every time you fall short again, the belief hardens. This is just who I am. But pause for a second, because that belief doesn't actually match the evidence. Here's the first crack in the laziness story. Lazy people don't feel guilty about wasting time. They don't lie awake thinking about what they should be doing. They don't watch videos like this looking for answers. You do. That frustration you feel, that constant sense of falling behind, that's not laziness. That's mental exhaustion. And mental exhaustion is sneaky because it looks like a motivation problem. But it isn't. Think about this. You can scroll on your phone for an hour without effort. You can binge videos late into the night. But the moment you try to focus on something important, work, learning, planning your future, your brain resists. Suddenly you feel tired, restless, avoidant. People assume that means you're weak. But what it actually means is your brain has been running on overload for far too long. Your brain processes thousands of signals every single day. Notifications, messages, news, social comparison, background anxiety, unfinished thoughts. Even when you're resting, your brain is still consuming, reacting, deciding, judging. So by the time you ask it to do something meaningful, it doesn't push back because it's lazy. It pushes back because it's spent. And here's where the damage really happens. When you misunderstand exhaustion as laziness, you do the worst possible thing. You attack yourself. You force motivation. You shame yourself into action. You promise to do better tomorrow. That inner pressure doesn't create discipline. It drains you further. Over time, something shifts inside you. You stop trusting yourself to follow through. You hesitate before starting. You lower your expectations just to avoid disappointment. Not because you don't care, but because failing again hurts more than staying stuck. This is why calling yourself lazy is so dangerous. It turns a temporary state into a permanent identity. And once something feels like identity, people stop trying to change it. But the truth is simpler and more hopeful than that. Your brain isn't broken. Your willpower isn't gone. Your potential didn't disappear. Your brain is tired in a way modern life never taught you to recognize. And once you understand what's actually draining it, the entire story you tell yourself begins to fall apart. To understand why your brain feels constantly tired, you have to stop thinking in terms of effort and start thinking in terms of load. Your brain doesn't get exhausted because you work too hard. It gets exhausted because it never gets to stop working. Most people think rest means sitting down, scrolling, watching something, zoning out. But from your brain's perspective, that's not rest at all. That's more input. Every swipe, every headline, every short video forces your brain to interpret, evaluate, compare, decide whether to care. And all of that costs energy. Here's something almost no one tells you. Your brain has a limited daily budget for decisions. Every choice you make, even tiny ones, spends from that budget. What to check first, what to reply to, what to ignore, what to worry about, what to postpone. By midday, most people have already made hundreds of micro decisions, and they don't even realize it. So when it's finally time to do something important, your brain doesn't feel motivated, it feels drained. This is why you can still perform under pressure, in emergencies, at the last minute. When someone is watching, your brain finds energy, not because you suddenly became disciplined, but because urgency temporarily shuts down noise. The problem is, you can't live in emergency mode forever. Your nervous system wasn't built for constant alertness, and modern life keeps it permanently switched on. There's another hidden drain most people miss. Your brain hates unfinished loops, unsent messages, unmade decisions, tasks you keep thinking about but never start. Each one stays open in the background, quietly pulling on your attention. You may not be consciously thinking about them, but your brain is. That's why you feel mentally cluttered, even on days when you didn't do much, you didn't rest, you just carried more weight. And when your brain is overloaded like this, it goes into protection mode. It starts avoiding effort. Not because effort is bad, but because it feels unsafe when resources are low. So it pushes you toward easy dopamine, scrolling, snacking, distractions that require nothing. Then comes the cruel part. You look at your behavior and say, "See, I'm lazy." But if you zoom out, the pattern becomes obvious. You're not avoiding work, you're avoiding overload. And every time you blame yourself instead of the system draining you, you add one more layer of mental stress. This is why motivational speeches don't work for you. They assume the problem is effort, but effort isn't the issue. Your brain is running without recovery, and until that changes, no amount of pushing will fix it. The good news is this: once you stop treating exhaustion like a character flaw, you can finally address it like what it is, a signal. Once people realize they're mentally exhausted, they usually make one decision. They try to rest more, they sleep in, they take days off, they do nothing, and for a moment it feels good. But then something confusing happens. The fog comes back, the resistance returns, and the same question appears again. Why am I still tired? This is where most advice breaks down, because there are two very different kinds of tired. There's physical tiredness, the kind sleep fixes, and there's cognitive fatigue, the kind caused by overstimulation and unfinished mental loops. You can be fully rested physically and still mentally exhausted. Your brain isn't asking for more rest. It's asking for resolution. Think about how good it feels to finally send a message you've been avoiding, or to complete a small task you've been putting off. That relief isn't about productivity, it's about closure. Completion tells your brain, this is done, you can relax now. But modern life rarely gives you that feeling. Most days, you start 10 things and finish none of them. Your brain stays in a constant state of almost. Almost done, almost decided, almost started. That almost is exhausting. So here's the shift that changes everything. Instead of trying to do more, do less, but finish what you start. One task, one decision, one focus block. No multitasking, no background noise. Depth matters more than speed. 10 minutes of real focus restores more mental energy than an hour of shallow distraction. And then, there's something even more important than completion. Silence. Not podcasts, not music, not scrolling without thinking. Actual silence. Silence is the signal your nervous system has been waiting for. It tells your brain, you're safe. You don't need to scan. You don't need to react. This is why clarity shows up in the shower, on quiet walks, late at night when the world finally slows down. Your brain isn't tired because it's weak. It's tired because it's never allowed to be quiet. And until it gets that space, it will keep choosing avoidance over effort. Not out of laziness, but out of self-protection. I'll show you how to rebuild energy without forcing motivation, and how to stop feeling broken for something that was never your fault. Here's what changes once you stop calling yourself lazy. You stop fighting your brain and start protecting it. You simplify instead of pushing. You reduce noise instead of demanding focus. You create small moments of depth where your mind can finally recover, and something quiet but powerful happens. Motivation comes back on its own, not as hype, not as pressure, but as a natural willingness to begin. Because motivation isn't something you force. It appears when your brain isn't exhausted. The proof is simple. When your mind has space, clarity returns. When clarity returns, action feels lighter. And when action feels lighter, you stop doubting yourself. You were never lazy. You were overloaded in a world that never pauses. So start small. Finish one thing. Sit in silence for a few minutes. Remove one source of constant noise. Not to be productive, but to let your brain breathe. Because a rested brain doesn't need discipline. It moves naturally